said, we need to hear from law enforcement on this. It's particularly important to hear from law enforcement so that the BLM Marxists, the defund the police, decarcerate the prisons crowd doesn't inflame passions and lead people to get on board with idiotic public policies that make their neighborhoods less safe. And so we have heard from some, but it doesn't mean that the premises being advanced even by law enforcement should go without challenge. Let me give you an example. Former LAPD detective Timothy Williams, who I guess now is a consultant on excessive force cases nationally, he was on CNN, and he had this to say about the unwritten rule when it comes to police and suspects who resist arrest, who flee.
If we have to chase you, then you're going to pay for that. And normally the payment is a beating. What you saw there in Memphis, Tennessee, is an indication of what goes on in the communities of color if you have to chase someone. And that's the result of that.
You run, you pay, the unwritten rule. I got to tell you, there have been many cases we've covered of of people resisting arrest, of people fleeing police, of police having to chase people down, and they have not even generally resulted in a beating, certainly nothing on the order of what Tyree Nichols was treated to. So, yeah, I don't think so. I think that's a political statement that doesn't necessarily square with the facts. I'll give you another one we talked about a bit earlier. This idea that in neighborhoods that are afflicted by a high incidence of violent crime, what's happening is police, because of the violence they're treated to on a daily basis, they're allowed to do anything. Anything goes because you're policing a high crime area. No, I don't think that's what we've seen either. What we've seen, particularly over the last few years, is just the opposite, seems to me, where civilian political authorities create an environment where it's anything that goes for the criminals, and police are on their heels. They're not doing stops. They're not doing chases. They're discouraged from doing both. It's not police anything that goes. It's the small criminal element that has a disproportionately negative impact on public safety that has been given an anything goes card by mayors and prosecutors. That's what it seems to me. Let's get another law enforcement perspective on this. Pleased to be joined by DuPage County Sheriff James Mendrick. Sheriff Mendrick, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Good morning. So what was your reaction to seeing those videos in the Tyree Nichols case? What did you think about what went down?
Well, I think the first and only time I'll be able to watch it, it actually brought tears to my eyes when this guy's begging his mom for help when these so-called policemen are beating him to death. I mean, that is nothing we would tolerate here. In my opinion, they should get whatever I don't know what penalty could be harsh enough, but whatever it is, they deserve it. That was the worst atrocity. There's no payback. There's no reason for that to happen. I mean, that's why we go the other way, and we train crisis intervention training to de-escalate, to learn to talk to people in a normal way and to not do stuff like that. I brag a little bit that since I've been elected, I have 400 sworn deputies. I don't have one citizen complaint for use of force from any deputy since I've been elected. We've been doing the CIT training for over 7 years. We've trained almost 1,000 officers. We do it different here in DuPage. We talk to people, we work it out, we de-escalate, and that stuff really works.
Well, do you think they had any training at all? I mean, they showed up so angry and so fixing for a fight that I don't know what he could have done for them to, they didn't even ask him. They just threw him out of the car, and I don't know what preceded, and you don't either, but that there seemed to me that there was no training whatsoever.
Yeah, I've never seen conduct like that before. That was the most, like I said, it was so bad that I don't think I could watch it again. It was traumatizing just to watch, and I think that there probably was a lack of training. I've never seen 5 cops in tandem do something that horrible before. I mean, it was an atrocity. There's no excuse, and I don't care what happened before. Nothing justifies what they did.
And the this idea that there is a sort of system-wide, you run, you pay, unwritten rule among police. Is that true?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We have people run from us all the time. I'd say most of the time they're missing people, missing suicidals, and those people are actively resistant. But we use a minimum amount of force. We don't beat people. There is no such thing as payback out here in DuPage County. We are the law. We follow the law. We believe we're under more scrutiny than a citizen because we're applying the law, and we should be an example. And that was no example of policing. That was a wolf pack.
And with respect to, the whole give me your hands, it started at the first stop. It continued when they caught up with him and stopped him a second time. I mean, it seems to me there was, again, to Amy's point, a lack of competence when you have that many officers unable to get an unarmed suspect who was generally afraid and trying to be compliant, although he was scared and maybe he was more jittery than he should have been, but it's understandable. It seemed to me there was no reason they couldn't have gotten his hands behind his back, him cuffed, and everybody safe after the process.
Right. So again, the training that we do, this de-escalation training, is exactly that. See how they came in hot and they were already, saturation point, anger. And the whole spirit of our training is to start really low. You always leave yourself room to escalate. If you come in yelling at somebody, you're already past where you need to be. Yeah. You got to come in with calm, concise orders of what you want, why you want it. It's all about your flexion, your demeanor, your decibel level. We train all of that to prevent exactly this. You start at the lowest point possible, so there's always room to escalate if that person escalates it.
Do you think the police chief should be fired?
It would all depend on what they have in their training. I don't know if they did have training and just disobeyed it, or if they were properly trained, or if they weren't trained. If they weren't trained, yes, that's called vicarious liability. If you don't train your people, you're responsible. I mean, it's just that simple.
A former NYPD inspector named Paul Morrow talked specifically about the units like the Scorpion unit in the Memphis Police Department, these sort of tactical units, and they're in unmarked cars and so forth. And he suggested these units that have sort of a special purpose to interdict gang crime and so forth, they particularly need proper oversight from a sergeant or from higher ups. And we could have a situation here where there was a culture within this unit, which was in Memphis, 44 officers, so a significant percentage of the police department there, and lack of oversight, professional oversight by the brass may have been a problem here as well, creating a poisonous culture.
Well, I do. It's concerning just to hear that name, Scorpion. It sounds like, what is a scorpion? It's aggressive. It stings. That'd be like naming a police canine Cujo. I think it's a horrible look.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. All right. Well, and also too, I mean, just again, playing devil's advocate on behalf of the police, you had one officer after Tyree Nichols had been subdued and they were awaiting paramedics to arrive, sort of speaking to other officers and saying, he went for my gun, he almost grabbed my gun, and so on and so forth. We don't see any evidence to support that claim in the video, and one wonders if he was sort of performing for the body cams, knowing he's on body cam, to provide a rationale for what they did, knowing they had done wrong.
Well, to me, that is one of the biggest problems that I had, the lack of remorse. This is disturbing. After something like that, I feel guilty if I yell at somebody. I couldn't imagine how I'd feel being the cause of some atrocity like that. To not see, real remorse, I think that should be a penalty enhancer. I mean, when you see demeanor like that after the fact, to me, it's just unconscionable.
Yeah, and it raises the police sort of issue too, where officers have to. When they see a fellow officer pull out a blackjack and start beating a suspect like that while two other guys are trying to, wrangle him into custody or kicking him in the head, that somebody's got to say, well, hey, what are you doing? And pull him off. I mean, there was as many as 10 officers on scene by the end of it, and nobody did much of anything.
Well, and that's what bothers me. It was like groupthink. And again, for me, the hardest part was hearing this poor young man screaming for his mother while he's being beaten down. How can not one person there have a conscience to where, oh my God, he's begging for his mom while he's been beaten. I just don't know. Like I said, that was one of those things that I saw it once. I don't think I could ever watch it again.
Yeah,
It's so disturbing.
Well, and then how can you make a claim, which they're going to have to make in their defense? I'm sure that they fear for their lives or their safety or something. You have an unarmed kid who's crying for his mother. Wasn't really posing much of a discernible threat. Seems like a very difficult argument to make.
I agree with you.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's tackle a few other topics. You've made some news along with other county sheriffs around the state in stating that you're not going to enforce the assault weapon ban that was signed into law by our duly elected governor. Give us your perspective on that law.
Yeah, it was something that I wasn't going to really get involved in the beginning, but then all the sheriffs started writing letters. I started getting so many citizen contacts that it was just inundating my office. We were all trying to call people back. There were hundreds of phone calls, though, so they wanted me to put out a statement, and I felt obligated to the people who elected me. My voters had asked me to put out a statement on my opinion of what I'll be doing on this. And the way the law was written, it had nothing on enforcement. We all know if you don't put who's responsible enforcing it in the law, that it's going to be an unfunded mandate down at the end of the year. That's just how this works every time. And I couldn't get anybody to tell me yes or no, will we be expected to enforce this, until I got a call from Sean Casten, congressman, who told me that if I was willing to go to a house filled with Molotov cocktails, I should have no problem going to people's doors for this law.
What?
So,
he called on you to resign, did Sean Casten?
Yeah, I had to resign, recall, I think he said, or something like that. He told me on the phone too, I have no First Amendment right as a sheriff, and I really thought that was odd that, to see the shock and horror of a politician when they don't get their way or when somebody challenges them simply because before you even start the conversation of, is this right or wrong? It's an impossibly unfunded mandate that would crush our law enforcement. We're already down cops. I'm down 32 employees. I was already told by all the police unions that, I'll have a whole lot more retirements if I try to make them go to doors for law-abiding citizens' guns. So that's just not something we could do or should do. It's rare when, the financial thing and the right thing to do line up together, but here they do. We could never afford the police manpower to possibly do this. And I am not going to send policemen to law-abiding doors and then end up having a standoff possibly with somebody who had never committed a crime in any other circumstance before. And then what? We have a shootout, and then am I going to get backed by Sean Casten? No. Then he's going to leave me to hang out to dry.
So wait. What was your response to Sean Casten when he said that to you?
Well, it got worse. He said some other things I'm not going to divulge just because he really got nasty with me. But
imagine that.
Yeah.
Sean Casten got nasty. Is there any other way Sean Casten behaves?
But think about it. If they'll treat your duly elected sheriff of this county that way, just think how they'll treat you. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I live in the definition of a hostile work environment, political intimidation. I mean, when everybody, 90 other sheriffs put out this letter, and they're talking about selecting laws. Should we talk about Kim Fox over in that jurisdiction? I mean, there's selective laws right there. And I'm the only one they focus on. You have all these state representatives, congressmen, county board members, and they all focus just on me like I'm the only one doing it. I was like the 90th person on board. But for some reason, they wanted to make me an example. I don't understand why.
Well, they're trying to
further their political careers. Right?
Yeah, well, they're trying to close out their domination of DuPage County, which they're close to doing. So here's an issue they think they can use as a political cudgel. There's no question about it. With respect to one other matter, too, you have this pending Supreme Court review of the Safety Act 2.0. If the Supreme Court were to hold the revised Safety Act constitutional and thus, essentially dictate that it be enforced, what would that mean for you, and what would it mean for the violent criminals that are housed in the DuPage County Jail?
Well, it's funny, too, how we complained about the Class B and C misdemeanors and trespass. We complained about the no cash bail and not being able to do the rehabilitation services that we do anymore. And it's so funny that they call us fearmongers and extremists and all this stuff for a year and a half until right after the election. Then they're like, hey, you're right. We need to change those parts.
Right.
So I thought it was really odd that they agreed with us all along, but so it was politically safe. They didn't make any changes. But even as is, I mean, it's more digestible with those changes in it. They changed it from, threat to specific named person to threat to society again. They gave you an option to arrest on B and C misdemeanors if the activity persists. That softens it a bit, but still, you're going to take basically nobody for property crimes. I don't see how I'd be able to hold a burglar because they're not a threat to society. Society are people. So you kind of wipe out property crimes. And, we get about 80% of the people that we get in our correctional facility, because we have the only jail in the county. So everyone brings their detainees to us. 80% of them are on substance, and half of them are self-medicating for mental health. And we do full drug detox, drug recovery, psych services. Once we do the detox, we can tell you what mental health malady you have, and we treat that with full staff. Full psych staff, medical staff, medicated assistant treatment. We go into over 70 classes of program, everything from family management, domestic management. We do job training. We've graduated 130 in sanitation. We're doing welding, indoor, outdoor horticulture. We're fixing people. Our recidivism rates in heroin have dropped from 90 percentiles down to 18. Our criminality, 75 to 15, basically, for the people who go through this programming. We do reentry. We keep track of these people for up to 2 years when they're out. We found a model. It's jobs. It's family, it's religion, and we give you all those as like an intervention. That these are services without money you could never get in the outside world, and that will be taken away from us if we can't hold people.
That's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't looked at it from that perspective in terms of the services they won't get. Think about it from the offender's point of view. If you want the offender to stop being an offender, well, that's a good point. What about the other matter too? And this obviously would be in concert with Bob Berlin, the state's attorney. But Jim Glasgow and other state's attorneys who've sued on this basically say, look, even with the additional days provided, these clocks that are put on prosecutors to bring cases for trial are still going to be onerous. They're going to result in they're going to result in defendants all wanting to start the clock as soon as they're processed, their attorneys. And we may not be able to get all these cases as strong as we would like them prepared for trial within the window that's provided by the Safety Act. And so that means people charged with serious crimes, violent crimes, will be released pending trial.
Well, that's certainly a definite outcome that's going to happen with a lot of cases. It's going to be a crunch time for us to prove up a case in basically 2 days. Plus, the financial side for the citizens is going to be massive. They had to build a 24/7 bond court into my sheriff's office. That'll have to be staffed on weekends and holidays. So, do the math. There's 52 weeks in a year, so there's 104 extra days of overtime right there when I'm down 32 in staff. So that's going to be overtime for, public defenders, judges. They have bond court on Saturdays, Sundays, and Christmas and New Year's. That's going to cost a lot of money. So there's going to be a financial aspect for the citizens on this and taxes. There's a lot of money that goes into this. This was, 750 plus pages of things that are going to all hit in different times. It's so convoluted that we believe that a lot of this is actually going to be determining trial and error case law. Something's going to happen. We're going to take an action. The judge is going to rule. That's going to be case law now. But there are a lot of conflicting portions of this law, too, that just it eats itself.
Better hope that the Supreme Court follows the lead of the Kankakee Circuit Court. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. He is James Mendrick. He's the sheriff in DuPage County. Sheriff Mendrick, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
It's time to tee it up once again for the Tinley Park Golf Show from February 3rd to February 5th at the Tinley Park Convention Center. Come out for a driving range demo area with manufacturer representatives from Callaway, Wilson, Tour Edge, Cleveland, Cobra, and Mizuno. After browsing aisles of newly released equipment and apparel from the top retailers of the Chicago area, compete in skill challenges and enjoy a live telecast of the Pebble Beach